Do you have a friend or family member who is having trouble buying their first home? Well, you're not alone. In the last 5 years, the amount of income needed to qualify has more than doubled from $49,000 to over $101,000. Let's dive into it. My name is Will Allen, Centera Capital. We are an RIA. I've been in the industry for over 27 years. We've been doing these market update videos now for the last 2. We've been growing as a channel. Most of you who are watching are not subscribed, so go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. Turn that on. You don't want to miss a video. In just a minute, we're going to talk about the federal government debt problem, and we're going to see, is it a spending or a revenue problem? But before that, let's get into a housing update. So at the very start today, I mentioned the shocking stat. We're going to put a chart up that goes back to 1990, and this is looking at how much income does someone need to earn to qualify for their first home, a starter home. What jumped out to me with this is if you look from 1990 to basically 2015, for most of that, other than about 2 or 3 years when the housing bubble was formed, you needed to make somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 to qualify, and that was pretty consistent for a very long time. Then, in the last 8 to 10 years, this has started going up. Pre-COVID, 2020, it was sitting at $50,000, and notice that has doubled. Just in the last 5 years, you now need to earn over $100,000 to qualify to get a starter home. That is a much, much tougher ask than someone making $30,000 or $40,000. And it's one reason why I am constantly hearing from a lot of clients of mine who have adult children that they're having a hard time getting their first home. As a result of this, by the way, our second chart, which looks at the median age of first-time home buyers. And again, this chart, by the way, goes back to 2002, but you'll see there for up till 2015, that same kind of time period we were looking at a few minutes ago, somebody had to be 30, 31, 32 years old for that median first-time home buyer. And then that has skyrocketed since COVID also, and is up to over 38 years old. So people are having to wait a lot longer to be making enough money to when they can qualify. So look, this is an issue that has taken place. One of there's 2 big reasons, by the way, that this big jump has happened. The first is that mortgage rates were sitting at 33% on a 30-year mortgage pre-COVID. They are at 7% now. The second thing is home prices went up between 40 and 50% today versus pre-COVID. And so when you add those together, the median mortgage payment back 5 years ago was around $1,100 before taxes and insurance. Today, that's up near $3,000. So that's the reason why it takes so much more money, wages, in order to qualify. So this is a very critical topic that a lot of people across the country are grappling with. We wanted to go into some detail. That's point number 1 on housing. So the next point on housing, I want to take a look at one of the ramifications of mortgage rates being up at 7%, is that there aren't a lot of existing homes being sold right now, because a lot of people who have mortgage rates of 2.5% or 3% or 3.5% just don't want to sell and give up that mortgage rate. Last month, existing home sales, you will see here, came in at a 4 million annualized number, okay? And this is a chart going back to 2016. You can see the average there in that time period has been 5.15 million homes sold. So we are down near the lowest level over the last 10 years in terms of activity. By the way, this is something that if this number would start going up would be very beneficial for the economy, because when someone is getting a house ready for sale, they typically spend money, right, on painting or getting new carpets, those sort of things. When they sell, they go buy another house, they spend money fixing that up, and the new owner of that home spends money fixing that up. So there's a lot of money that changes hands during this period. That's not happening very much right now, okay? But we want to notate that for the economy, 4 million annualized number, that's not a great number. Now, if we look at what was the median price, the average price basically for an existing single-family home last month, it was $408,000. Now, pre-COVID, this was around $265,000. Okay, again, at that point, at 3% mortgage rate, $1,100 payment. Well, now you're paying a lot more. This number of $408,000, though, is down from its high of $432,000 last year. So prices have started to come down a little bit for existing homes. Now, here's what's really interesting. The next chart is the median price for a brand new home. And note, it is $407,000 last month, basically the same as an existing home. And this is down from a peak back several years ago of $460,000. That's a big drop. Now, let me tell you what's happening here. We have heard from the home builders, Lennar and D.R. Horton, Toll Brothers, Pulte as an example, that they have been saying, hey, we to get buyers are having to lower our prices. The other thing we're having to do is do mortgage buy down. So we spend money so that the mortgage lender can give a much lower mortgage rate. For a while, it was about a 1% lower mortgage you could get going. And so if a rate was 6.5, you get 5.5. If a rate was 7, you get 6. Well, in the last quarter, a lot of the buy downs were for 2%. So you could get a 5% mortgage if you were buying a new home. And this is showing you that basically you were having to pay about the same thing to get a new home as if you were buying an existing home. We crunched the numbers. Going back the last 20 years, on average, a new home went for about 17% more than an existing home. So right now is really a great time if you're thinking of buying a new home. You're going to get the lowest price in a long time, and you're also going to get a really great mortgage rate. Now for our second topic, and that is taking a look at the amount of federal debt. Right now, Congress is debating a bill that's built around tax cuts, extending current tax cuts, as well as the amount of spending. And it's a topic that there's a lot of controversy around. We're not going to wade into that topic of who's right, who's wrong right now, but I am going to say that this has been a problem that has been building up, especially over these last 25 years, regardless of which party's been in control in the White House or of Congress. This is a chart of the total amount of federal debt out there. You can see we are now over $36 trillion. If you just went back about 25 years, this was around $4 or $5 trillion. So this has skyrocketed over that time period, regardless of the politics. Here's the current factor is a lot of people wonder, hey, are we spending too much? Are we not getting enough tax revenue? Is that the problem? What's going on? So we wanted to take a look at two charts to help us answer that question. The first takes a look over these last 10 years at the amount of government spending over the previous 12 months versus the amount of revenue collected over the last 12 months. And look back at early 2015 there, you can see that there wasn't a large gap between the two at the time, okay? And by the way, when you see a gap, the government's got to issue debt in order to fund the difference there, right? So that's one of the reasons that our public debt that you saw in the previous chart goes up. But you'll notice that as time went on there was starting to be even a bigger difference between the gap there, and then COVID happened and this exploded higher. There was no doubt about that. But what I want to point out is over the last 5 years is that the gap has remained really large. What you would have hoped is once we got past the COVID time period and the extraordinary measures that took place during that time that was necessary, that things would kind of go back to where they were before. But that is not what has happened. Much of the spending that took place has been basically codified in where Congress said, okay, this is now our new benchmark, okay? So where we stand now, over $7 trillion of spending the last 12 months versus $5 trillion collected in revenue. That's a $2 trillion gap. So that's a lot of extra money that we're having to raise in bond issuance to cover that gap. The next chart takes a look at going back to 1950, the amount of federal spending as a percentage of GDP, our economy, versus revenue as a percentage. So lots to look at. Let me break this down for you and make this, try to make it easy to understand. So in blue, you get the amount of spending as a percentage of the economy. The blue dotted line is the average in this time. So right now on the far right, you can see that we are spending 23.8% of GDP versus the average is 20.6. So we're way ahead of the average. Now, as far as the amount of revenue, tax revenue that we bring in, on the far right side, you'll see in orange, we are at 17.58% now. The average has been 17.64%. So what this means is that right now we're bringing in about the same amount of tax revenue as historically we have to fund the government. It's the spending that is way above its average. And so what I would say is, could tax policy be looked at and tweaked in certain areas? Sure. But the main thing that is the takeaway here is there needs to be a significant cut to the amount of spending that's taking place now if we want to get the budget in check. So what's the takeaway for your money from an investment perspective with this government debt? I was first asked this question from clients back in 2008 when debt was much, much less than it is today. The fact is, if we look around the globe, situations like this has happened in other countries and the debt levels don't matter until they do, meaning you can go a long time and go a lot farther in debt than you think you could before it starts to impact the markets. The tell here is going to be the interest rate on a 10-year Treasury. We'll put a chart up, and we've talked about this a lot this year as it relates to the markets. But this is one of the signs that the market is becoming uneasy with the amount of government that we have. The higher this rate goes, the more concerned the markets are, is a big takeaway. Right now, this is at 4.5%, give or take. We've said if this gets up and above 5, that could be a problem for stocks. That also could be a problem for politicians because this is their scorecard. So today we talked about housing, and if you are trying to buy your first home, the income you need to qualify for the home has more than doubled in the last 5 years. That is making it difficult for a lot of people. We also said that historically it costs a lot more to buy a new home than an existing home, but today that is not the case. They are basically on the same level. So if you want a new house, now's a good time to look at it. We also answered the question, is the federal debt mainly a result of not enough revenue coming in or too much spending? And the answer was too much spending is the big problem. All right, if you have not seen our videos before, don't know who Centera Capital is, you can go to our website and go to the contact page and reach out. Listen, we do these market updates. If you are not hearing from your advisor, we would love to talk to you. Thanks for watching and take care.